the last Vietnam veteran serving here, but I never imagined serving, when I was serving in all those capacities, that I would ever end up leading a charge in the Senate to fight on behalf of the residents of the 51st state. But that's where we find ourselves, and I think we regularly see the negative effects of DC residents of not having a vote or a voice in Congress. We've talked about that, especially during a global pandemic. As a district with 46% African American population, let's not forget that, like other communities of color across the nation, African Americans are suffering disproportionately or have suffered disproportionately in D.C. from the COVID-19 pandemic. And most of those infected in D.C. are people of color, as you know. And I'm told that about 75% of those who've died here are African American. And I would ask Mayor and then Mr. Muriel, can you speak on to the issue of inequality here? And Mayor Bowser, could I please ask you to speak to why the nearly 700,000 district residents, our fellow Americans, have been and continue to be disproportionately impacted during the pandemic as a result of not being a state?
Well, thank you, Senator. And I think you're just about right about those stats. We saw early on in the pandemic that our African American residents were not only being infected with COVID-19, but dying from COVID-19 in vastly greater numbers than their white counterparts. We know that African Americans and our Latino residents are more likely to be in essential work positions and were unable to stay at home when stay-at-home orders were introduced across America, because they were the grocery workers, they were the nursing assistants, they were the people that were keeping our sanitation services going across America. So they were getting infected more, and because of centuries of disinvestment in our health, we're also dying more. What was a tragedy that we didn't expect during all of this, as we're facing a 100-year pandemic, is that we would be left out of the emergency funding that we so desperately needed to stand up testing, to build alternative care sites, to make sure that we could provide alternate spaces for learning in the CARES Act. $755 million we were shortchanged, and we spent the better part of the year making sure we got that money back. And I'm grateful to this Congress for seeing that through. But what that meant, Senator, for the first time in no one could remember since, that we were treated in a formula with territories rather than being treated like a state, which we are for hundreds of federal statutes. So it just made clear to all of us how important it was that our practical operation as a state, a county, and a city can only be codified and not reversed in any piece of legislation with statehood.
All right. Thank you for that response. Mr. Muriel, would you like to add to those words?
Let me say, Senator Carper, appreciate you raising this issue. A few important facts. The United States is approximately 14% African American. The District of Columbia is some 46 to 50% African American. The failure to provide federal voting rights for a member of Congress and 2 U.S. senators for the 51st state disproportionately impacts a large number of African American citizens of the United States. There's once a time when the District of Columbia was as much as 70% African American. And DC became, in the early 20th century, a place where African American residents of Virginia in North Carolina and South Carolina, and the Old South is a part of the Great Migration transition to. They had no right to vote in Alabama or Georgia or South Carolina or North Carolina or Virginia, and they had no right to vote in the District of Columbia. Then the Voting Rights Act came along, and people in Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Louisiana, Texas, and Florida gained the right to vote for members of the House and members of the United States Senate. But the members of the District of Columbia, the Black residents, and beyond the Black residents were left out and left behind. Mayor Bowser identified the structural impact of this is that DC, for many federal programs and initiatives, is treated like a territory, which denies the residents of the District of Columbia, including its Black residents, equal treatment and therefore equal representation, not only in voting, but across the board. And that's a structural inequity that's associated with this fundamental denial of the right to vote. One only believes, as I do, that the residents of the District of Columbia have been patient since 1965, have been patient as they sought to achieve and to accomplish their full rights as American citizens. And I doubt if anyone else outside of the District of Columbia would stand for being disenfranchised in the way the residents of the District of Columbia have been disenfranchised. This is something whose time has come, and this is something that is of right.
Thank you for those words. That was I thought very insightful. Thank you. I've been joined by Senator Rosen. I want to thank you for joining us today, for being a supporter of this legislation, and you're now recognized. Thank you. Thanks, Senator Rosen.
Well, thank you, Senator Carper. Appreciate your work on this for many years and your chairmanship of this committee.